Don't Torture the Dying. The writer is founder chairman of Pallium India, a palliative care trust. The Constitution of India guarantees life with dignity as a fundamental right. Generally speaking, we enjoy this right, but it all changes if we get an incurable disease or when and eventually wither and die of old age. In those circumstances, we should still have the right to live the way we want to and die where we want to, but we find that we no longer have any choice. An economic study found that India was one of the worst 15 countries in the world to die in, coming 67th out of 80 in quality of death. In India, as we near the end of life, we cease to be treated as human beings and become mere containers of disease. Until it is seen or experienced, it is not easy to understand the degree of assault or dignity by inappropriate medical treatment in incurable diseases. Typically, even if one is fully alert and able to take decisions for oneself, one finds oneself stripped of that privilege. Whether it is advanced cancer or some other illness, the family takes over and makes decision and the patient is bundled into a hospital. There, in turn, the family loses control. Hospital protocol takes over and transfers the patient in an intensive care unit, which is the worst part of it. In his last days, when one should be with the loving family with a gentle touch, one finds oneself isolated from dear ones when they are needed most. At a time when the deepest desire is to see a grandchild once more and to bestow a kiss on the cheek, one finds the children are not permitted into the holy intensive care unit. The immediate family is allowed in for 5 minutes twice a day, but they are afraid to touch. The body is literally covered with cables. There are alarms screeching. Even when everyone knows that the patient is dying, a tube is inserted into every orifice in the body. Among the many tubes, one is likely to be passing through the voice box into the windpipe. There are some of the most sensitive parts of the body. A catheter periodically pushed into it to the aspirate mucus in one of the most painful things one can experience, like a red hot iron pushed into you and twisted as it is withdrawn. As one person described it, you have never known that much pain was possible. It has destroyed the average person's power of imagination. When one feels a weariness of a degree that cannot even be imagined and long for some peace to shut the eyes, it is prevented by a perpetually lighted room with no distinction between night and day. Does that remind you of torture chambers with dozens of frightening beeps and screaming alarms and weird masked creature walking around? This is so awesome. Fear overcomes the person. There is an urge to know what is happening. But that tube in the voice box prevents speech and no one bothers to give you any information. When one panics and tries to pull out the tubes, the nurses binds the hands and feet. The right to life with dignity is violated in the cruelest way. I am a doctor and have been an intensive. I know very well that intensive care can dramatically save lives, but I also know that it is the most horrendous infliction and suffering of and violation of human dignity in the context of incurable illness. We should be able to recognize that death is the inevitable consequence of life and that the person should be allowed to go with as much dignity as possible. The Government of India has prepared a draft law on the subject, available at the website of the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Its objective is to protect the terminally ill, to ensure life and death with dignity, and to provide for palliative care as the human viable alternative to intensive care. However, as drafted, the law confuses between euthanasia, which is willful termination of life, and withdrawal of life support, which is only permitted natural deaths. Today, you have the privilege of leaving advance directives which, in the absence of any existing law on the matter, has the backing of Medical Council of India. But this new draft law says that every advance medical directive called living will or medical power of attorney executed by a person shall be void and of no effect and shall not be binding on any medical practitioner. The implication of the draft law would be that when one is no longer competent to communicate decisions and the family decide to respect the person's expressed wishes to refuse life support measures like artificial ventilator, they will have to apply to the state high court. The draft law provides for quick action by the division bench of the High Court in 1 month, 1 month, 1 month, in which every moment is agony. 1 month in the first week of which treatment cost in an intensive care unit would have impoverished the family and left them homeless. The law is not really about them, this is about us, each one of us, and our families. The new law threatens to violate our autonomy and dignity at the most vulnerable time of our lives. We must all protest and prevent it from coming into force. We should be able to recognize that death is the inevitable consequence of life and that the person should be allowed to go with as much dignity as possible. Thank you.